This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Chov Hey. All the learning should be incredible. Schashidach for Yisrael Chaim in Devar Shlamim Levizava Ovi Ben Teli Shimon Ben Chayo Chamir Bas Chaya Bezel Chana Bas Nechama. They should all find the perspective of appropriate Shidduchim Ve'Karei Mamish, as well as the learning should be a schus for Shlema Shul Yosef and Yefei Deshmo Ben Tilim Natal Zim Bechles and Nechama Bas Yiva B'Shavfei V'Shir Chana Ve'Soich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on towards the bottom of Chav Dalidom and Beis, the middle of a discussion of a woman that was suspected to be an adulterer, as the Mishnah taught us that she was a nitan Alesha's ish. They suspected that she was with another man while she was married, and the Mishnah said that she got divorced, and even if she gets remarried to that man, who there were rumors about, again, Rachel is married to Ruvain, there are rumors that she is together with Shimon, says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, she has to divorce Ruvain, and even if she goes and she marries Shimon, Yaitzi, she has to divorce Shimon, she's not allowed to be with him. Rav taught us yesterday that the din was be'edim, that the Eidim, they convicted and said that she is a saita. What is the din of a saita? That she is found to be convicted. She's found that she was incorrectly together with another man while she was married. She's also to her husband Reuven, and she's also to the Baal Shimon. Yesterday we had one question which we tried to ask on Rav, and we concluded no, that it's not true. It's just teaching us a different chiddush, that even if she marries someone in the interim, forever she's not allowed to go back and marry the adulterer, but the only time she'll have to be divorced from him. Again, she divorced Ruvain after the rumors. Now, if she goes and marries Shimon, she has to divorce Shimon, the suspected Mizaneh, is only if what? There were Eidim. That is the Chiddush of Rav. Let's say there were no Eidim, still a Chatchila, she should not marry. But if she did without Eidim, then we would not force them to get divorced. So Meisvei asked the Gemara about 10 lines to the bottom of Chavdal Mebeis. First word of line is Lo Yichnois. Meisvei asked the Gemara about Bedvar Amurim Kishein Lo Yibanim. Said the Raisa, when do we say that they have to get divorced when there were no children? Avli Yesh Lo Banim. Lo Yiteitzei, that if the original marriage had children, if Ruvain has children with Rachel, even after there are rumors that Rachel was together with Shimon, we do not force Rachel to get divorced. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Vimbo Eidim, but if we are Eidim that convicted that she's a Saita, they're Eidim that said that she was Mizaneh, then how can you say she can stay married? Toma, Vimbo Eidim. Ve'imbo Eidi Toma, there Eidim that came and said she was Mizaneh. Afilu yesh lekama banim teitzei. We feel bad, but if there are Eidim that convicted that she was Mizaneh, of course she has to get divorced. So how could Rav say the case is only talking about whether Eidim? Explains the Gemara, Rav Muki Lam the Masisa Beish Labanim Ve'yesh La Eidim. Rav says the case of the Mishnah, which we said there were Eidim, is in the case in which there were children, and then there were Eidim. Again, if there were no children, then it could work without Eidim. But Rav is learning, no, the case of the Mishnah is that there were children, and when there are children, that's the Chiddush that they only have to be divorced if there are Eidim. Why did Rav learn that? And therefore, when there are Eidim, we'll force them to get divorced, if not. Why did Rav say that? Look, Mabish Ein Labanim. Why didn't Rav just learn the Mishnah that there were no children? And then Rav could have said, Avogado like Eidim. And then the case is, even without Eidim, she has to get divorced. You know where Rav got it from? Rav got it from the wording of the Mishnah itself, 7 lines at the bottom of the Amid. Ma'arya ditani hoitzi'uhu, lisni hoitzi'ah. Why did the Mishnah say that Bezdin requires them to get divorced? Why didn't the Mishnah say hoitzi'ah, he divorced her on his own? Ela kol hoitzi'uha bebezdin. It means the wording of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, it hones in that it was someone else that told them to get divorced, which is Bezdin. Well, Bezdin Eidim Udam Afki, and Bezdin only acts upon Eidim. And that is why Rav was compelled to learn the Mishnah as a case where there were Eidim and there were children. Says the Gemara, another way of answering. Viva same another way of learning of Rav. Hani Mas Nisan Rebbe. These brises are Rebbe, and Rav argues. So Rav said in our Mishnah, the cases where they're Eidim, we had a question yesterday, a question today that seemed to contradict Rav. Says Gemara, yeah, That's Rabbi, and Rav argues on Rabbi. Titania, as we learned in Araisa, Roichel Yoitzev Isha Chagaris. In a case where a man comes home, and as he comes up to his house, he finds the Reichel. He finds a perfume peddler. It's literally what a Reichel is, leaving the house. And he sees his wife getting dressed. Bisinar, putting back on her undergarments. Amar Rebbe, because it's mechur, it's insane. Therefore, they have to get divorced. Meaning, because it's clear that there was some sort of relationship that happened here. Therefore, she has to divorce her husband. Another case, if they find some spin on top of the bed. Amar Rebbe, again says Rebbe, it's clear that something happened in this case, therefore they have to get divorced. Brisa continues with another case that Rebbe says they have to get divorced. In olim afuchim, if the shoes were turned upside down underneath the bed, again the shoes turned on were some way of showing that obviously they were together, that the shoes were in some sort of messed up way underneath the bed. Says Rebbe, they must get divorced. So we see in this case that when does Rebbe obligate, when does Rebbe saying they have to get divorced? Only in a case where, not only in a case, in a case in which it's a rumor. We don't know for sure. There were no Eidim, but this is enough for Rebbe to say that they have to get divorced. Says the Gemara, clearly not like Rav. What did Rav say? Rav learned that the only time you have to get divorced when they're Eidim. It's true, all these cases, we'll call it Regalayim L'Davar. It looks bad, it sounds extreme, but we don't know for sure that they actually had an act of Tashmish, and yet Rebbe is forcing them to get divorced. So all the Brises which go not like Rav are like the opinion of Rebbe. But now the Gemara for a moment hones in on the last case of this Brise. It says, if the shoes were all turned upside down, let's just see whose shoes they are. Let's see whether they're the shoes of this man that just left the house. Answers the Gemara, no. The place where the shoes were turned upside down. Meaning there was something looked wrong. Some explain the dust under the bed, you'll have to tell from that reason. Whatever the reason is, it looked bad. So these are the rumors in which Rabbi is forcing a divorce. Clearly not like the opinion of Rav that said only with Eidim. Says the Gemara 5 lines down, Helchs like Avasei Rav, Helchs like Avasei Rabbi. Asks the Gemara, Kasha Helchs like it's a stira. Like Kasha, but called the pasik, but called the light pasik. If there's a rumor and the rumor stops, then we paskin like Rabbi. They don't have to get divorced. If there's a rumor and the rumor does not stop. If there's a rumor and the rumor stops, then we baskin like Rav. They don't have to get divorced unless they're Eidim. If there's a rumor and the rumor doesn't stop, then we bas like Rebbe, they have to get divorced. Says the Gemara, Kadol Apasek, Veleke. Oh, the Gemara speaks it out. I should have kept reading. Kadol Apasek. If the rumor doesn't stop, Veleke, Eidim, with no Eidim, Kerebi. Then we pass like Rebbe, they have to get divorced. Kadol Apasek, Eidim, Kerav. But Kadol Apasek, Adkam, how long is a Kadol Apasek? A rumor doesn't stop. Rabbi explains, Amr Liyem, Malatomi, Taimi, Demasa, Yeme, Upalga, the amount of time that the rumor circulates for a day and a half. This is only true. It doesn't stop in the interim. If there's a time period that the rumor stops and then it picks up ground again, then there is no issue with that rumor. If the rumor stopped because they're afraid of talking about one of the people involved, then that doesn't show us anything. That's the reason, but it's still a good rumor and they'll have to get divorced. If the guy's no haters, the haters when they created the rumor. So it comes out the only time there's going to be a rumor, it's only going to be an extreme case, which is the reason why the Gemara is asking that you would have to get divorced in such a case. And now we continue quoting a Mishnah, which is going to come back and circle back around and ask a steer on our Mishnah. Tanan awesome. We learned in the Mishnah, if someone divorces his wife because she has a bad reputation, there was rumors about her, lo yachzer, he cannot remarry her. Misham neder, if he divorced her because of a neder, lo yachzer, he can't remarry her. Now why not? So Rashi in the Gemara again explains, Rashi over here explains the reason being that if he divorced her because of Ishem Ra, he can't remarry her because we're afraid that what's going to happen is going to be clarified that nothing happened. And then you don't want to remarry her and people are just going to divorce and go back and forth with their wives. And we don't want that to happen. And therefore, we do not allow them to get remarried. Similarly, that what's going to happen? That if she has the neder annulled, then he's going to want to go and remarry her. So anytime a person comes to get divorced, either because his wife is a neder or because his wife is a shemra, we tell him, be careful. If you get divorced, you will never be allowed back with this woman. And that is how we control the situation. So Shalach lei Rabba bar Ravuna le Rabba bar Amnachon Abdin Rabbeinu Kanas Mahu Sheyatze. What is the din if he actually went? You just told me if he divorced her because of a neder, if he divorced her because of a shemra, he's not going to remarry her. What if he did? What's the halacha now? Kanas, if he went and he legally remarried her, what is the halacha? Does he have to divorce her? Amar leitanina. We learned in a Mishnah, our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, if there are rumors about a woman and you divorced her, if you illegally remarried her, then what? If the rumors about a woman and her husband divorced her, and then she illegally remarries the bayil, what's the halacha? You have to get divorced. So seemingly, what do we see from this case? Seemingly, it should be the same as in our case, that if you go and you marry the person about the rumors about, it substantiates the rumor. So too in our case, that if someone divorces his wife because of a bad reputation, you cannot remarry her, and if you do, you'd have to get divorced. Amarle midami hasamoitziuhu hacha. In our Mishnah, the same deal. Bez didn't force them to get divorced, but Hacha, in this Mishnah, he divorced her on his own, and therefore, how can you bring a raya? Explains the Gemara of Rabbi Nachum Asdisa Nami Oitziya. He learned our Mishnah, not Oitziuha, but rather Oitziya that the husband did it on their own. Vakatimi Dami says the Gemara, is it still comparable? Hacha, Baal. It's two different cases. The cases don't line up equally. Amar le shaber dami. No, it's still comparable. Adadi. Hachamar rabana lo yikanas imkanas yotze. Hachanami amri rabana lo yachzer vimkanas yotze. So it's going to be the same thing. V'loi, but says the Gemara, no. Hasam alumne alume lekala. Hachamina kambe v'kala v'lesei. No, there is a way to differentiate the two cases. And therefore, says the Gemara, it's not a clear raya one from the other. That in the Mishnah and Gin, when the husband remarries her, what that actually does is doesn't feed the rumor. It negates the rumor. Why? Because if he goes and he remarries her, what will the Veld say? What is everyone going to say? You know, everyone's going to say, he looked into it and it wasn't true. Whereas in our case, it's the opposite. In our case, if after she divorces, she then goes and marries the suspected adulterer, that feeds the rumor. Everyone says, very good. They actually were mizana. Now she got divorced, and now he could go and marry her. So there's a fundamental difference between the two cases. In the Mishnah again, it destroys the rumor. In our Mishnah, it feeds the rumor. Therefore, we cannot bring a raya one from the next. Now the Mishnah continues, Chavei Amar Aleph, towards the bottom. And the Mishnah continues, in different cases in which one is not allowed to marry a woman, as we saw in the previous case where there were suspicions, etc. Says the Mishnah, Hamevi gam Medinas Hayam, of getting fame. If someone brings a get from Medinas Hayam, v'amar, and he says, the din that when someone brings a get, he has to verify that it's a kosher get. So he says, this get, b'fanai nechtam, in front of me the get was written, b'fanai nechtam, in front of me this get was signed, in order to substantiate that the get is a kosher get. And with this get, let's say Reuven comes from Medinas Hayam, Reuven comes from overseas, bringing a get, that Rachel is divorced from Shimon. Beautiful. The get is kosher. Reuven says, Rachel is no longer married to Shimon. Rachel could go and get remarried. But Rachel cannot marry one person in this world. You know who? Reuven. Lo yisas ishtay. The one that brings the get is not allowed to be the one to marry the woman, because, as Rashi here points out, because we're relying on his word, he cannot be the one that goes and remarries this woman. Mace, let's say if someone testifies, someone comes to Medinas Hayam and testifies that the husband died, haractive, or he testifies, I killed the husband, hargnuhu, or he testifies, we killed the husband, again, he cannot be the one to marry his wife. If he says, I killed her, then he cannot marry, I killed him, then he can't marry the wife. He says, we killed him, then he could marry the wife. And the Gemara obviously will explain the difference is in the case. So let's go into case number 1 of the Mishnah. Someone brings a get. Someone says, I saw this get written. I saw this get signed. It's a kosher get. She could remarry, but not to him. Says the Gemara, the reason why he cannot go and remarry this woman is because he came from Medina Zayyam, and therefore we're relying upon him. His words are that which creates the kashrus of the get, and therefore he cannot go and marry this woman. Eretz Yisrael, what's the din if someone brings a get within Eretz Yisrael proper? The din is you do not have to say when you bring a get in Eretz Yisrael, the mere bringing of the paper in Eretz Yisrael inherently proves its kashrus, because in Eretz Yisrael they are beki and they know how to write in. Then we don't have to listen to his words. Then he says ishtai. Then in such a scenario you'd be allowed to marry the woman. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. But in the next case, the Mishnah, when the man said that the husband died, that when she's allowed to get remarried, it's not because of his testimony that he died. Why not? A woman doesn't go and get remarried based on the testimony of the Eid Echad that says her husband died. She looks into it. She doesn't want to get messed over. And yeah, we said, he cannot marry this woman. So why in this case, if he brings a get from Eretz Yisrael, even though we're not relying on his word, why in that case would he theoretically be allowed to marry this woman? Explains the Gemara, no comparison. Hasam leka ksava, hacha ika ksava. There's a fundamental difference. If he brings a get from Eretz Yisrael, what is proving that this woman can get married? The get, the piece of paper, the ksav in the paper. So even though he is one that brought the get, he's allowed to marry her. But in the case of Misa, it's true. He says that the husband died. It's true that she's going to go and look into it. But at the end of the day, there's no written testimony, so therefore he cannot go and marry this woman. And now we go to the next part of the Mishnah, that the Mishnah said, someone testifies that the husband died, or he says, I killed him, or he says, we killed him, he cannot marry the wife. Asks the Gemara, the obvious implication of the Mishnah is he cannot marry her, but could someone else marry her? Of course. Asks the Gemara, Rav Yosef, lines at the bottom of the Amid. If someone comes into Bezdin and says, Pliny Ravani Loinsi, so and so slept with me against my will. Ravani is a lashon of Mishkav Zachar. So Ruvain walks into Bezdin and says, Shimon sodomized me against my will. I didn't agree to what he did to me. Who? Va'acher mitzarfin lahargoy. The halacha is if someone is a roiveya, another man, he's chayim misa for the act of Mishkav Zachar. So if Shimon comes into Bezdin and says Ruvain was a mizana with me, we'll just use those words, it's the wrong words. Ruvain sodomized me against my will. So then Shimon could combine with another aid that was there in order to kill Ruvain. Ruvain b'chayim misa. L'irtzaini. If Shimon comes into Bezdin and says, I was a willing accomplice to the crime when Reuven came over to me and he wanted to be Reveah with me, I agreed. Then Shimon is a Rasha. He's agreeing that he didn't have Eira. Says the Torah, do not be together with a Rasha Eidos, and therefore he will not be allowed to give Eidos. Okay, that's the case. Now we're going to develop a question on what we just said. So what's the question? The question over here is we see clearly that when someone is an accomplice in a crime, he is not allowed to give Eidos. So how come in the case of the Mishnah, where he said Harganu, he said we killed, we believe him. Why do we believe him? Once you're a Rasha, we don't believe your words. So if someone comes into Bezdin and says, I, with someone else, killed someone, why do we believe them to allow that person's wife to remarry? Suggests the Gemara, maybe the Chitei Mashani is the kill barabanan. Maybe the reason is, we know there's always special leniencies and dispensations for Eidus Isha, for Aguna, if we want a woman to be able to get remarried. Maybe that's the reason, but it's not true. Menashe taught us as we turn over to Chavdal and Mabez, Gazlan de Divrayim Kasher Leidos, but Isha, Kasher Eidus Isha, Gazlan Divrei Torah, Apostle Eidus Isha. Even within Aguna, even within the Kulois, or that we want a woman to be able to get remarried, it's only within the realm of halacha. On a din derabanan, we'll forgo to let her get remarried. But on a psaslis daraisa, no way. So when this man says, I killed Reuven, I and my friend killed Reuven, we should throw his edus out of court. We shouldn't let her get remarried, asked the Gemara. Suggests the Gemara, Neima Rav Menashe, Rav Yehuda. You know what? Rav Menashe going with Rav Yehuda, who says she can't get remarried. And whereas the Rabbanan argue this din that we just quoted, Gezel Levrayim, Kashle Eidus Isha, Gezel Levrayim, Apostle Eidus Isha, that's Rav Yehuda that Rav Menashe will agree to, but the Rabbanan disagree and hold that even on Paslas D'Oraisa, we believe for Eidus Isha. Amalech Rav Menashe, another time if you the Rabbanan, no, I can even go to Rabbanan. Time with the Rabbanan, Hacha Kidir Rava, Adam Harava, Adam Karov, Eitel Atzma, Vedam, Adam Misim, Atzma, Rasha, classical clauses, classical terms. Person has an Negias about himself, and he'll never make himself a Rasha. And therefore, if someone gives Eidos that he killed a woman's husband, it does not make himself into a Rasha, and therefore we're allowed to believe his words with regard to the fact that the husband died. Let's look at Rashi and on the Mesa Atzma, as they do say, it's Atzma Lasis Rasha. And therefore, again, this is a big sugya, exactly how we could split his words in half. But that's what we're saying over here. He doesn't make himself into a Rasha, and therefore we'll let the wife remarried. Leima Rav Yosef Damar Rav Yehuda. Ask the Gemara, so should we say that Rav Yosef hold like Rav Yehuda? Rav Yosef, Anamar Aleph, seemingly only fits with Rav Yehuda, not the Rabbanan. Amalach Rav Yosef and Adam Rav Yehuda Rabbanan. Shiny Eidus Isha the kill Rabbanan. Rav Menashe Damar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yosef will say Eidus Isha is different, and Eidus Isha will be masking to the Rabbanan. Whereas Rav Menashe is the one sheet that holds like Rav Yehuda. Haraktiv Arganu Atinas. It's the end of the Mishnah. Said the Rav Yehuda differentiated between the case where he said, I killed him, then she cannot remarry, but he said, we killed him, then she could remarry. Asked the Gemara, what's the difference? It doesn't mean that I killed him. It doesn't mean Harganu that I killed him with someone else. You know what it means? I was there when someone killed him. I was with someone who killed him. A bit difficult in the wording, but that's what it means, says the Gemara. And I'll bring you a raya. The story with robbers. There was a certain robber. They're bringing him out to be executed in a place called Kaputkia of Amr Lahem. And the robber on his way to be executed said, Go tell Isha Shimon ben Kayin, the son of a Kayin, I killed her husband Shimon, and she could go and get remarried. I killed her husband in the entrance to Lod. And some say it was in his entrance to Lod. But this man, as he's a Gazlan, as he's on the way to get killed, he gives Eidos that he killed this woman's husband in order that she could go and get remarried. And what happened? And the Bezdin allowed his wife to get remarried. Amr Lahem, Rav Yehuda said, so seemingly what do we think the raya is? We see that even though he himself is not the greatest guy, even though he's on the way to get killed, when he gives Eidos that he killed a person, it must be that it means he was there with that person. Amr Lahem, Isham Raya, that's the case. It just means he was grabbed because he was listening. He wasn't really a Rasha. So it comes out fascinating. The case sounded like there's a man on the way to get executed. At the end of the day, what's really happened? This man did no crime. He didn't steal. There's no reason he's getting executed. A Goyish court paskind, because he was there, he's getting executed. So he's not a rush at all. And then what happens? He sends and gives Eidos that he, quote unquote, killed the wife Shimon, and to tell his wife that she can remarry. And the Gemara is translating, it doesn't mean he actually killed her. It means he was there when Shimon was killed, and that is the reason why she's allowed to remarry, and that is the raya back to our case that when the Mishnah says Harganu, Rav Yehuda translates that meaning that he was there at the time that the person was killed. It continues the Mishnah, Chacham Sha'asar Es Ha'isha, continuing in the theme that when someone is somewhat involved in a story, they themselves are asr to that woman. So if a Chacham asr an Isha, if a Chacham paskind, there's a woman that came that she made a neder against getting Hana, and the Chacham paskind, I'm sorry, you have to stay in your neder, so she has to get divorced from her husband. So a Chacham Shah says the Isha ben Eder al Baila Hareza lo Yisayna. That Chacham can't be the one to marry this woman. Again, it looks bad. It looks like he only asked her to her husband so he can remarry her. But let's say there's a case of a woman, a Ketana, that does Mia and she walks away from her husband in front of this Chacham, or this Chacham was on a bezin that did Chalitza, then he's allowed to marry her. Why? Neshu bezin, because in these cases, Mia or Chalitza, it's not the Talmud Chacham acting on its own. It's the Talmud Chacham acting within the confines of a Bezdin. Therefore, there's no personal objective over there, and therefore the Bezdin themselves are allowed to remarry this woman. So the Mishnah seemingly said in the first case that if the Chacham answered up this woman, then he cannot remarry her. But the implication of the Gemara of the Mishnah is that ha'hetera yisena, that what happens that let's say he mattered her neder, and now she is a mutter to her husband, then he's allowed to marry her. So says the Gemara, what is the case? If we're talking about that there's one Talmud Chacham here, can one Talmud Chacham matir an eder? You need to have a bezdin for a taras darm. We all know Rosh Hashanah, right? We find a bezdin. It must be there were three people here. And Michshidi says the Gemara, and even though there were three people over here, what do we see the case is? But we see that there are three Talmidei Chachamim. So Michshidi, are you going to tell me that all three are Chayshid? V'atana, we learned in the Mishnah, he said, the end of the Mishnah said we're not Chayshid. So what is going on the first case of the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, Leilam Bechad, Uchtam Rav Chistam Rav Yechram, B'yachin Momche, Chanam B'yachin Momche. So the Chiddush of the first part of the Mishnah is, it's a Yachid. You asked that a Yachid cannot be one to be matter and neder. It's not true. A Yachid Momche could be one to be matter and neder. And a Yachid Momche that was matter or aser the neder, that's when we're going to have to be suspectful that he would not be able to remarry her. When would he not be able to remarry her? In the case where he answered the neder. But if he mattered the neder, as the first Rashi and the Gemara says, if he mattered the neder, and then either the husband died or he divorced her, then he would, yes, be able to remarry her. And the Gemara's answer is, and the kasha was, Mishiyu ein biyachin momcha. A special chiddush that a yachid momcha is allowed to be matir a neder on his own, but in the case where he did not matir the neder, in the case where he answered the neder, then he cannot remarry her. Why? Because since he does a din on his own, there was no bezdin with him. We're afraid that people will suspect that he did it for ulterior motives. And we'll pick it up from the end of the Mishnah on the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.